Hey, how's it going everyone? Hopefully you guys are excited for today's video, where today we're going to be covering Selena Quintanilla, and there's not really much more to say except, to get right on in. Selena Quintanilla Perez would be born on April 16, 1971 in Freeport Community Hospital in Freeport, Texas, being the youngest child to Marcela Ofelia, hopefully I'm pronouncing her name right, Quintanilla and Abraham Quintanilla Jr. Her father would quickly notice that she had musical abilities when she was around 6 years old, and that would also be shown within the movie and the Netflix series, where they portrayed him teaching AB how to play the guitar, and he heard her singing, with him telling People magazines that, quote, her timing, her pitch were perfect. I could see it from day one. And in the trial would also state that, quote, when she was 6.5 years old, when I found out that she had tremendous talent, I was working at Doe. And when I would come home from work, I would play the guitar and Selena would sing along. And I'm aware, as any other person that is a fan of Selena, of the reputation that her father had during her career, which I will talk about at the very end in terms of misconceptions. But he wasn't lying about her talent at a young age. As luck would have it, there actually would be footage of her at that age, and I would actually like to show you guys her singing at the age of 8, which just really shows that she was really talented. So he would open his first Tex-Mex restaurant, Papagayos, in Lake Jackson, where Selena, along with her siblings, Abraham III and Suzette Quintanilla, would often perform, but not in a serious way, at least for that moment. But that wouldn't last long, as the recession caused by the 1980s oil glut, hopefully that's how it's said, would force the restaurant to close, causing the family to go bankrupt and would be evicted from their homes, with them living off food stamps. They would move to Corpus Christi, Texas, where her father would become the manager of the newly formed band Selena y los Dinos, where they would then begin to promote them by finding them gigs, such as playing on street corners, weddings, quinceañeras, and fairs. So as Selena and Los Dinos grew in popularity, the demand for her to perform and travel would begin to interfere with her education, with one of her teachers, Marilyn Greer, going to her father telling him that she disapproved of her musical career because of how much time she was being pulled away from her education. So she would threaten Quintanilla Jr. to the Texas Board of Education, saying that the conditions to which Selena was exposed to were inappropriate for girls her age, which, shout out to the teacher for caring so much about Selena. She definitely deserves some props for that. And so Quintanilla Jr. would actually tell Greer to, quote, mind her business, but it wouldn't be just her, as other teachers would also express their concerns when they noticed how tired Selena appeared when she would arrive at school. So her father would pull her out of school along with her brothers and sisters when she was in the 8th grade so they could focus on their career. But she would also earn her GED at a correspondence school in Chicago and would also be accepted at LSU, where she would enroll at Pacific Western University, where she would take up business administration as her major. So during the first year of touring, the family would actually basically sing for food and just barely enough to pay for the gas. And I don't know how accurate the Netflix show is in terms of how they started up, because apparently they did show a scene with AB dumpster diving for cans of peaches so that they could use that for lighting for their shows, which is kind of creative and pretty cool if it is accurate to what actually happened. And you could also give them props for basically making it work with whatever they had. So eventually they would earn enough money for them to actually buy an old bus, which they called it Big Bertha, and they would actually use that as their touring bus. And it would be in 1984 where she would actually record her first LP record called Selena y los Dinos from Freddie Records. And although she wanted to record songs in English, Selena would actually start recording Tejano music, which was a male-dominated genre at the time. But Selena believed that she should record her music related to her heritage, and also the fact that it was in Texas, which is very known for their Hispanic population. So during the recording sessions for the album, Selena would actually learn how to speak Spanish phonetically with her father's guidance, mainly due to the fact that she just couldn't speak Spanish. And for those who want to know what phonetically means, it basically just means that you listen to how it sounds rather than reading it off a piece of paper and learning how to pronounce it. And in order to promote the album, she would actually make regular appearances on the Johnny Carnales show, which was also a radio program where she would make regular appearances on. And I do want to show some of the footage just so you can take a look at how she was during that point in her career.
Si te entrevisto más tarde, ahorita van a tener cambio de ropa y todos eran blancos, ¿no? Pues sí, naturalmente.
We splattered it with fluorescent paint, permanent paint, fluorescent paint.
Okay, y la gente que nos está escuchando en México, ¿Cómo saben qué hicieron?
Los pintaron.
She would also be discovered by Rooney Torino, the founder of the Tejano Music Awards, and would win Female Vocalist of the Year at the age of 16 in 1987, and would win it for 9 consecutive years after. And although the band did gain popularity over time, they would still get rejected by a lot of Texas music venues, mainly due to the fact that a lot of the band members were underaged. I think all of them were underage during this point, and not to mention the fact that Selena was the main singer, which again goes to the fact that it was male dominated. So with promoters telling her father that she was never going to be successful because she was a woman in a genre that was historically male dominated. But that wouldn't deter her father, and Los Dinos, as they would also release 5 LP records in 1988. And it would be in the year of 1989 where Selena would actually perform at the Tejano Music Awards, where Jose Behar, I believe that's how his last name is pronounced, who was the head of the newly formed EMI Latin record label, alongside the head of Sony Music Latin, watching her perform. Quote, "About 2 weeks after I started at EMI, the Tejano Awards were on. The awards were a huge deal. I called Mario and asked him to accompany me. He was already with EMI, and I had no artist, no employee, I had nothing. So now I was going from king to loser. Sitting there by myself, nobody gave me the time of day. Mario and I were leaving the Tejano Awards, and just as we were walking up to the big doors on the back of San Antonio Convention Center, the crowd went kind of crazy. This young girl came on stage and was dancing and singing. We stopped, and we were both very impressed. We went right back in, and we waited for her to finish. I went up to her after the show backstage and said, 'I'm Jose from EMI.' She said, 'Get out of here.' She didn't believe me." Behar was actually on the lookout for new Latin artists and wanted to sign Selena to the label. Sony would also be interested, offering Selena's father double of what EMI was offering. Finally, like the third time, I said we wanted to meet her manager. Her dad came out. The next day we had breakfast, and the rest is history. And it is kind of funny just to bring the fact that Behar has gone on to mention that he said that he thought he had found the next Gloria Estefan, with his superiors calling him illogical, mainly due to the fact that he'd only been in South Texas for less than a week. And as fate would have it, Quintanilla Jr. would also end up choosing EMI's offer because of the potential for them to do a crossover album, and because he wanted his children to be the first musicians to sign to the label. But before Selena began recording for her debut album, Behar and Stefan Finper, who was the staff attorney, would request a crossover album for her, where she would record 3 English compositions for the heads at the EMI Pop division, but the request would be denied as they thought that Selena needed a bigger fan base to even sell such an album, which kinda crazy, but at the same time I can understand from a corporate side. I believe there were many options, but it was very tough to get interest internally, said Finper. At certain times of the shopping, we were both mystified by the inability of some people to recognize her true potential. Unperturbed, she would go on to release her debut album, Selena, on October 17, 1989, with her brother AB becoming her main producer and songwriter for the majority of her music career. And this would mark the first time of her ranking on the top 10 of the US Billboard Regional Mexican Albums, placing at number 7, with her performing way better than any other recordings done by other Tejano female artists. In the same year, Coca-Cola would want Selena to become one of their spokespersons in Texas, being featured in commercials and doing promotional tours. Would actually use a jingle in the commercial that was composed by her brother and her future husband Chris Perez, who had actually joined Selena y Los Dinos months earlier as the band's new guitarist.
Can't stop it, can beat the feeling of Coca-Cola classic. Can't beat the real thing.
And the relationship is definitely complex, because initially they would keep things at a professional level, but over time they would start to develop feelings for each other, which was brought up by Chris, where he would mention that AB basically treated the band to a vacation in Acapulco, which is there when he started to, start liking Selena, which is kind of weird because he was in a relationship during that time. So realizing that it wasn't a good thing, he thought it was best for both of them if he created some distance away from her, but it became increasingly difficult for him, so they decided to then try and build a relationship, which I don't have much information on his past relationship with the girlfriend that he had at that time, but I'm assuming that he did go to her and explain that, that he was breaking up with her. I'm guessing, maybe, I don't know. And they would express their feelings at a Pizza Hut, where they would become a couple shortly after, which you can read about in Chris's book, which I highly recommend. It is very, very good. It gives a lot of insight, a lot of moments, and I will be reading like certain sections of the book, but I still highly recommend you reading it. And they would keep quiet about this as they had a very valid fear of Selena's father basically telling them to break up, which did cause Selena stress. But she didn't really want to hide her feelings for Chris, but we can talk about that more later on. But going back to her career, where in September of 1990, she would actually release her second album, Men Conmigo, with 3 songs from the album being released as singles, with one of them being one of her most successful singles, earning certified platinum. And she would perform many shows until one show in particular would introduce her to someone that would change Selena's life forever, that being Yolanda Saldivar. Where Yolanda was an in-home nurse for terminal cancer patients and was a fan of country music, although initially she actually had a dislike for Selena because she would dominate the award categories where she had a lot of favorite musicians that were nominated in, and Selena obviously winning them. Her niece would actually be the one to persuade her to go to one of her concerts where she would see Selena perform and immediately become a fan. And she would have the idea of starting a fan club in San Antonio in which she would call Quintanilla Jr. about 17 times, with him eventually relenting and agreeing as he thought it would bring more exposure to the band and would be using the profits to donate to charity. Yolanda would quickly become very close friends not only to Selena but to the family as well, gaining their trust and becoming the acting president of the fan club in 1991. In the same year, Selena would record a duet with singer Alvaro Torres called Buenos Amigos that went on to peak at the #1 US Billboard Top Latin Song charts, making it Selena's first #1 single, with her also getting 2 nominations at the 1992 Billboard Music Awards and the Tejano Music Awards, with just that song allowing her to tour coast to coast in the US and increasing the amount of regional Mexican and Tejano radio stations' playtime, who had initially dismissed her in the past. But then Selena's sister would soon bring trouble to Selena and Chris's relationship, as she would see Selena and Chris flirting with each other and then would go on to immediately tell her dad, with Quintanilla Jr. taking Chris off the bus, where they would then walk a few distance away, and then he would basically immediately tell Chris to end his relationship with Selena and that it was basically over. Mainly because he thought that they were just barely starting their relationship, when in reality it's been going on for months, as they were already building that kind of relationship that became into something more. And I think we can obviously tell that this wasn't going to stop them, with once the father leaving, Chris would actually go back on the bus and tell Selena what happened, with both of them agreeing that they would continue their relationship despite their father's disapproval, even though her mother and her brother both approved of the relationship. Which, from the look of things, at least in the online world, it does seem like there's this idea that the whole family disapproved of Chris's relationship with Selena, but that is just not the case, at least in terms of what I observed, because a lot of people refer to mainly Quintanilla Jr. as the family. So when they refer to the family this, the family that, they always say the family didn't like Chris, the family this and that, but it's just not true. It really isn't. And at least from the research that I've done, it seems like this mainly stems from the lawsuit that they had with each other after her death, because Chris, after her death, signed the rights of Selena to the family, and he wanted to make a book which was called Selena with Love, and they didn't like, or at least Quintanilla Jr. didn't like it because he was using her image and stuff like that. But they did settle that, so I guess in that they're good. And there's a couple of other reasons, like him dating his daughter and stuff like that, which I will talk about in just a minute, and the fact of how he managed the band, and it seemed like he was very controlling from an outside perspective. But yeah, there's like this painted image of him being like super bad by extreme fans, which make him look out to be very despicable and stuff like that, which, like, he's bad, but like not to the degree that they're trying to make him out to be. But I'll go over that more in details at the very end, but for now we're just going to cover why he didn't like Chris dating Selena. And when we're talking about the perspective of why he didn't like Chris, in reality, in his mind, he thought that it would, one, ruin the image that Selena had built, as she was, portrayed as innocent and stuff like that, and he portrayed something of a more rebellious nature, and actually goes more in depth in Chris's book, with him saying, quote, "Abraham and Marcela were extremely protective of her. They had to be. On the Tejano music scene, stories were always flying about women entertainers getting stage time because they slept with so-and-so. It was important for Abraham to present his band, and especially his youngest daughter, as chaste and pure, no matter what costume she wore on stage or how much makeup she wore." So just with that, it's obvious that his dad didn't want people to look down on Selena because them assuming that she basically fucked her way to the top, which is, I guess, it's commendable as a father, as even though to some people it kind of looks like he just wants to control her and stuff like that. Again, I'll cover that later, but we'll move on. And one of the funny things in terms of why he disliked Chris, or why he was so adamant of them dating each other, was that he perceived Chris as a threat. And I mean that mostly in the form of her career, where he has mentioned in an interview where he would say, quote, "What if they got married and he pulled her out of the band? All that work we did all those years would go down the drain."
You have to understand my point of view, how I see things. I didn't know Chris that well. What if he was a macho type, a machista? Because there has been incidents like that. They get married and say, well, you're not going to sing no more. And all the work, all the sacrifice that we've done will go down the tube.
Which to some degree I can actually understand where he's coming from, because they basically started from nothing. They basically lost everything, and he basically started them at a very young age. He took her out of school. There was so much sacrifice that came into it just to see her basically leave. I can kind of understand where he's coming from with that. It's still funny that he thought that Chris was going to pull her away from music when that's the opposite. He stated it before that he supported her music career and a bunch of other stuff, and if she decided to not be in agreement with something, he would support it 100%. But he knew that Selena wanted to do music, and he would have stuck by her with that stuff. It's just maybe in his head he was a little, tunnel visioned. With Chris also bringing up how he had built an image to Selena's father that would most likely result in him not being accepted, with him saying, quote, "I'm sure that to Abraham I was a stereotype, a ponytailed, beer-drinking hard rock guitarist in Tejano disguise. I sort of understood why he would object so strongly to me courting his daughter. He had treated her like a princess, a priceless treasure, and Selena was all that and more as a loving daughter and sister. Besides the obvious objections he might have to her seeing me because I was in the band and I wasn't good enough for his daughter, he would also worry about her getting hurt. Abraham had seen me with other women, and he thought of Selena as young and naive. It was easy for me how he might use the threat that I wouldn't be faithful to her as ammunition." And of course, he was the head of the house, as with anybody that's lived in a Mexican household or knows of that family dynamic, where the man is the head of the house and they have the final say. So it's natural for him to be upset with them going against his wishes of them dating, because it undermines his authority, which, I'm no stranger to either, in terms of me dating someone's daughter and them not liking me. Shout out to my suegro. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, it's like no stranger to, an older Mexican man seeing their daughter date someone and being like, you're not good enough for my daughter. You can kind of relate, just saying. So for anyone aware of that stereotype with someone dating a Mexican man's baby girl, you can probably relate a lot to Chris and the situation that he's in with Selena and her father. Not in terms of the band, but the fact that he probably wasn't good enough for her, which, I have my own opinion of how he could have navigated through it. Would he have accepted him? No, but there were paths that he could have taken that probably would have been better. But, that's just me. I can't tell him what to do, and it's all in the past and stuff like that, whatever. And Chris would talk about this in an interview where he would ask how unhappy Quintanilla Jr. was to find out about the relationship, with him saying, "I think the main reason for that was it kind of hurt his pride and his ego to find out that he was the last to know. And when things got tense and things were said by him, it hurt me that he was saying it, but I didn't let it get to me, because I know deep down he knew the kind of person I was." Which is true. I'll mention it in just a second, but I do not doubt that Quintanilla Jr. had like this whole mentality of Chris and stuff like that, and him being very what's the word, he gets mad. He's a hothead. The father is obviously a hothead and reminds me a lot of my dad, but he would think like be so angry to the point where he says things that he probably doesn't mean, but he's just so angry that he goes out to say it just to mainly hurt Chris, which I will say, what exactly happened. But even so, although her father made it clear that they weren't supposed to be together, they still did it in secret. And it would last for a little bit until her father actually saw them being romantic with each other while they were, sitting together on the bus. So then he would have the bus pulled over, where an argument would ensue between him and Selena, where they would both shout at each other, with Chris trying to mitigate. And it would end with Quintanilla Jr. calling Chris a cancer in the family, with him threatening to disband the group if they decided to continue their relationship. relationship, which is super extreme. And I'm guessing he just really wanted to get rid of Chris just because of how threatened he felt and how hurt he was by all that. And, you know, him having his daughter date someone that's not good enough. He for sure was mad to the point where he just wanted to hurt Chris by saying all that stuff.
No me lo presentó. Yo venía manejando y por el rearview mirror los vi que estaban abrazando. Fue buena. Me estacioné en un estacionamiento de un restaurante y fue cuando todas las cosas explotaron. Y yo corrí a Chris del Boss. Y hasta la fecha no sé cómo se vino el pobrecito para San Antonio, para su casa. Tanto que andaba protegiendo a mis hijas y aquí debajo de mi nariz sucedió, ¿verdad? Chris y Selena se enamoraron.
And just to add some context, all of the band members, from what I could see, actually did support their relationship together, but it was due to the fact that after the first time that Abraham told them to stop, they would actually start to shun Chris, and I'm guessing it was mostly out of fear because of them being kicked out of the band by Selena's father, which is totally understandable, and I think Chris understood that too, even though he was upset that they were basically shunning him out of the group and stuff like that. But I think we can understand why they wouldn't speak up, because they really didn't have a say. But yeah, it would result in Selena and Chris relenting, with Quintanilla Jr. firing Chris from the band and preventing Selena from leaving with him, leaving Selena devastated and heartbroken. But again, that didn't stop the love that they had for each other, as they would still quietly keep in touch. And in the same interview with Chris with Quintanilla Jr., calling him a cancer to the family, he would go on to say that, quote, his family knew about us being together and was supportive. When he said that, I was like, come on. But Chris would move back in with his father and would play music independently with his friends. In the meantime, while Selena would continue with her career, and for a time he was beginning to enjoy life being away from the situation, but mainly away from Quintanilla Jr. Although for Selena, she would also suffer a lot from being separated by him, and they would try to make it work. And it would be on the morning of April 1992 where Selena would pound away at his hotel room door, where she would force her way in, crying, telling Chris that she could not go on without him, with her wanting to get married that very day. Hesitant, Chris would actually tell her that it wasn't the right thing to do at the moment, but Selena would insist that her father would never accept their relationship and wouldn't attend their wedding even if they had planned it. So Chris would agree, and then they would get married at Nueces County in Texas. And Selena was sure that her father would either leave them alone or accept their relationship so that they could be together in the open. And they did plan to keep their marriage a secret, at least until they could find the right time to tell the family about it, but it wouldn't be long before the news of their marriage was out in the open by the media that was announced just hours later. But once news reached the family, they would try to track Selena, with them not being able to find her, and her father, obviously not taking it very well, would alienate himself for some time. And so the newlyweds would move into an apartment together in Corpus Christi, which I'm guessing, just based off the series, it was Selena's apartment that she was using for her fashion designing and stuff like that. And eventually her father would show up one day where he would apologize and accept the marriage, and would also bring Chris back into the band, which I do want to read the account of that just for you. And again, this is from the book, which I highly recommend, which I will mention a lot. Highly recommend it. Go check it out, but we'll read some passages. He began with an apology. If he'd been wearing a hat, he might have taken it off and twisted it in his hands. I shouldn't have been the way I was, he said. I hope you know that I was only protecting Selena. I told him that I did know that, but I was still offended and hurt. When we were on the road together, I spent more time with you and your family than I did with my own. I pointed out. You should know me by now. I would never do anything to hurt Selena. I love her. He nodded, accepting this, it seemed.
Pues ya después que se casaron, pues lo acepté y comencé a conocer a Chris un poco más y todo eso. Y pues yo lo quería como un hijo y lo quiero como un hijo. Y se hizo como parte de la familia de nosotros. Y de hecho, con el tiempo me di cuenta que fue lo mejor para Selena.
Which, to bring up again, he did have his reasons for why he disliked Chris initially, but he did come around to it once he realized his fears were unfounded. And I kind of forgot to mention it, but there was a point in time where Chris got arrested, which kind of also may have contributed to why he didn't like Chris, because he saw him as a hooligan, which again goes with the image being rebellious, a rocker, dirty, stuff like that, you know, the stereotypical image that a dad doesn't want his daughter to associate with, you know. So this one's more funny because apparently he actually thought that Chris was a machista, which is funny because that's, from what I could see, that's pretty much describing him and how he acted within his family. But moving on, After a month of being married, Selena would soon release her album Entre Mi Mundo in May of 1992, which many would actually consider her breakthrough album, with this album hitting the #1 spot and staying there on the regional Mexican album charts for 8 consecutive months, and being certified platinum 10 times, and for being the first Tejano album by a female artist that sold over 300,000 copies. And then she would be booked for a press tour in Monterrey doing a meet and greet. And it's no stranger to any Latinos, but at the time of any Texans of Mexican descent, also known as Tejanos, were looked down upon by Mexican citizens, with Selena still developing her Spanish during this period, which I will show some footage of her speaking Spanish, which can definitely show you how much she's improved over time, which I definitely got to give props to her because her Spanish is very good compared to when she first started out.
Bueno, la historia, lo que está atrás de eso es que mi papá tenía su grupo, propio grupo que se llama Los Dinos.
Los Dinos, sí.
Y por lo tanto, somos la segunda generación. Mi hermano es el productor y arreglista del grupo, mi hermana toca las baterías.
El vestuario, por ejemplo, ¿a quién se lo dejan?
Selena.
Selena.
Yo hago diseños de ropa también.
Diseño de ropa. Económicamente, ¿quién es el que vende, cobra y paga?
Bueno, mi
¿Todos?
papá. Mi
el
papá. Mi papá
muy
es el
bien,
mero, el gerente del grupo.
Me parece perfecto.
And it's kind of funny because the EMI Latin executives were apparently terrified of her because of her limited Spanish, but they honestly didn't need to worry about anything because she basically won the heart of the people, with a public newspaper saying that she was an artist for the people, just because, you know, she was very down to earth and stuff like that. She knew how to talk to people, so they didn't need to worry about anything. With many news publications saying that she was also basically a breath of fresh air compared to the telenovela actors who were more whitewashed, I guess you could say, compared to how she looks more authentic and more relatable to the people. But after her press tour, she would then be booked to play at several concerts all over Mexico, including the festival Acapulco in May of 1993, with even her performance in Nuevo León in September being attended by 70,000 people, claiming the title as the biggest Tejano act in Mexico, with her also releasing Como La Flor in her album as a single, which we all know is one of, if not her signature songs. With that song helping Selena dominate the Latin music charts and it becoming extremely popular in Mexico, with her being nominated for Song of the Year and the 1993 Tejano Music Awards, and the overall album being the second best-selling regional Mexican album of its time. And a year would pass before Selena would release her new album live, with it featuring some of her past tracks sung live, including 3 new songs, with them obviously hitting the top 5 Latin charts and winning a Grammy for Best Mexican American Album. And in May of '94, it would also be named Billboard's Album of the Year at the Latin Music Awards and Tejano Music Awards, and it getting certified gold, with her also earning an appearance in the telenovela named Dos Mujeres Un Camino, which got great ratings. So as she started to expand her brand, gaining popularity, she would also begin to design and manufacture her own clothing line, opening 2 boutiques called Selena ETC, with them being located in Corpus Christi and in San Antonio, with them including an in-house beauty salon. And this venture would appear to be a success, with her holding 2 fashion shows and it being in negotiations to open more stores in Monterrey and Puerto Rico. And because of Yolanda's work with the fan club, she would gain the trust of Selena and would be promoted to a manager position at the boutique. Selena would release her 4th album, Amor Prohibido, in March of 1994, hitting #1 and 3 in top Latin albums and regional music albums, with the former staying at the top of the charts all the way into early 1995, being certified multi-platinum and being one of the best-selling albums in the US in 1995. Her music was no doubt influential, with it being stated that this album popularized Tejano music to a wide audience in the entire history of the genre. But it didn't stop there, as she would also be nominated for a Grammy and winning Record of the Year at the Tejano Music Awards and both Regional Mexican Album of the Year at the Lo Nuestros Awards. This would be Selena's breaking point, as she was considered bigger than Tejano music, breaking the barrier in Latin music and gaining the moniker of the Queen of Tejano music, with NPR ranking her at number 19th on the list of 150 greatest albums by a woman, which is like such an achievement. It's really awesome to hear about that. Because of her gaining so much popularity, she would gain the ability to go on tour in South and Central America, where she wasn't as well known, in order to gain more reach over there. The chairman of EMI, Charles Koppelman, would then decide that Selena had achieved her goals in the Spanish-speaking market and wanted to start promoting her as an English pop artist. And she would continue her tour as she developed her album, working with Grammy Award-winning composers, and her also making another appearance in film, with her making a cameo in Don Juan de Marco. And just before I kind of move on, any footage that I can find or that I can taking place in the video, I will try. And if it doesn't, then you will never see it. But if I do, then, you know, yay. So going back in time to when Selena made Yolanda the manager for her boutiques, she would actually continue doing that job alongside doing the work of the president of Selena's fan club and building that relationship with Selena, eventually signing her as her agent in San Antonio. And after that agreement, Yolanda would then move from San Antonio to Corpus Christi in order to be closer to Selena, which did happen as she would accompany Selena on trips and even had keys to her house. But in December of 1994, both boutiques would begin to suffer after the amount of employees started to decrease as the company's bank accounts didn't have enough money to pay for the bill and having their workforce being reduced from 38 employees down to 14, with staff members mentioning how Yolanda would either dismiss employees that she didn't like or even firing them, or how they would notice her behavior to Selena, such as her always being nice to her, but in the moment that she left, she would treat everyone else horribly. And they did try to warn Selena about Yolanda's behavior and stuff like that, but she didn't really believe that, as she thought that Yolanda would never impose certain decisions on her business, which if you were lucky enough to see the interview that the Dallas Morning News did with Yolanda in 1995, with it mentioning how her devotion to Selena bordered on obsession, with Yolanda telling employees at the boutique that she wanted to be like Selena, and I mean that in like quotes, be like Selena, with an account from a former employee claiming that Yolanda was possessive of her relationship with Selena, would also try to distance her from other employees, with them believing that Yolanda's goal was to have more control over the employees and over Selena. And I'm guessing because they saw the relationship that Selena had with Yolanda, that it was better for them to go to her father, who would actually take this claim very seriously and telling his daughter to stay clear of Yolanda because she might not be a good influence, with him bringing that up in an interview with Primer Impacto, where he said, "I've always mistrusted Yolanda." But Selena would brush off the warning, as her father has his history of being distrustful of people in the past, which, you know, kind of bit him in the ass because of that. And it would be in January of 1995 where Selena's fashion designer Martin Gomez, her cousin, and some clients began to express concerns over Yolanda's behavior and management skills. And I do have some footage of him being interviewed mentioning Yolanda, which I might include in this. Like I said before, if you don't see it, then that means I can't post it in it, but you could probably Google it yourself, but hopefully it shows.
She was trying to put a barrier between Selena and I, and Selena and anybody, you know, and it just got really bad towards the end.
So bills weren't being paid?
Bills weren't being paid, you know, and I'd tell her, what's going on? And she'd say, I send that check. Selena trusted her. She was trusting, she was caring, she was very naive, you know, and Yolanda jumped on that.
Selena was Yolanda's life.
She had no other life.
With Martin clashing a lot with Yolanda, complaining that she was mismanaging Selena's affairs, with her cousin Deborah Ramirez also finding receipts that were missing from the sale of several boutique items, with Yolanda telling her to, quote, mind her business, and that it was not her concern. With them going at it again at one of the fashion shows, with Gomez accusing Yolanda of destroying some of his original creations and telling her how she never paid bills, with him stating how Yolanda had established a reign of terror. Eventually, Yolanda would then begin to record conversations without Gomez's consent in order to persuade Selena that it was Gomez that was against the business, that she would eventually decide to design the clothes herself and have Gomez in a supporting role, which does kind of suck that she was taking Yolanda's side. Sorry that she was taking Yolanda's side, but I think it was mainly out of just because she just couldn't believe that she would do such a thing. I mean, later on she doesn't trust her, but we'll get there when we get there. While all this would happen, Quintanilla Jr. would then begin to investigate, finding that Yolanda had embezzled more than $60,000, which by today's numbers is around $126,500, by using forged checks from the fan club and the boutiques. So when he went to confront Yolanda about how the fans didn't receive any of the packages that they have ordered, she would tell him that those fans were trying to get the items for free, which is both brought up within the show and the movie, where she tries to weasel her way out of it. But he would later discover that she had opened the fan club's bank account under her sister's name, Maria Elida. When questioned about it, she said that the bank did not allow her to open an account in her name, and saying that she didn't know why they didn't let her, before abruptly leaving the meeting, which led to Quintanilla banning Yolanda from contacting Selena. But Selena didn't want to end their friendship, mainly due to the fact that she still needed her to run the boutique, and the fact that she just needed the bank statements and the records of her business. So she really did need Yolanda, at least until she could get all the documentation and stuff like that. But she, at that point, honestly just didn't trust Yolanda. And after that meeting, they would then find that the fan club checks were being signed by Yolanda's sister's signature, even though the handwriting was identical to Yolanda's, which was evidence that she was forging checks and using her sister's name and then cashing them in to keep the cash. So Quintanilla Jr. would try to get the bank statements from the fan club bank account, with him finding that they had vanished, finding a letter in her handwriting stating that her sister had to close the account because of a major problem. In the letter, it was said that a member of the fan club by the name of Yvonne Perales was sent to the bank to deposit $3,000, but didn't and couldn't be found, saying that Maria found out about the situation, quote, too late, and then Perales and the money were gone. So he would confront Yolanda again, asking about who Perales was, with her saying that she didn't know them. Which, if you've seen both the movie and the show, she's so fucking obnoxious. Like, kudos to both of the actors. They did a good job portraying her as obnoxious and being so weaselly. He would say that Yolanda didn't trust the treasurer of the fan club, but had trusted a complete stranger to deposit $3,000 and told her, quote, tell that lie to someone else, with him concluding that Perales did not exist since none of the fan club workers had ever met her. The day after Yolanda would be banned from talking to Selena, her father would actually drive to their production company, Q Productions, and chase her from the premises, telling her that she wasn't welcome there anymore. And on the same day, Selena and Yolanda would argue over the phone, with Selena hanging up and telling her that she could not be trusted. And according to Quintanilla Jr., he would say that Yolanda would attempt 4 separate times to kill Selena, with the first being on March 10th, where Selena removed Yolanda's name from the boutique's bank account and Yolanda being replaced as fan club president by Irene Herrera. The next day, Yolanda would then purchase a gun at a place to shoot, a gun shop and shooting range in San Antonio, Texas. She would buy a Taurus Model 85 snubnose, which was a .38 caliber revolver, and .38 caliber hollow point bullets, which, for those who don't know what those bullets are designed for, is basically designed to cause more damage than normal bullets because they expand at the moment of impact. With Yolanda telling the clerk that she needed it for protection as her job as an in-home nurse because a patient's relative had threatened her. And 2 days would pass and Yolanda would go to her lawyer and write her resignation, with Quintanilla Jr. believing it to be her alibi. The same day, Yolanda would drive to Corpus Christi and check into the Sand and Sea Motel. But at the time, Selena was in Miami, Florida, which Quintanilla Jr. believed that this would have been the first attempt to kill Selena. When Selena arrived in Corpus Christi the next day, Yolanda would contact her to schedule a meeting, telling Selena that there was too much traffic and asked her to meet her at a parking lot 25 miles away from Corpus Christi. Upon arriving, Selena told Yolanda that she could remain in charge of her business affairs in Mexico, mainly because Selena wanted to continue employing her until she could find a replacement, but Yolanda didn't know that. As far as she knew, she was still employed. And this was brought up in Chris's book too, but Yolanda would then show Selena the gun after they talked for a bit, and saying that she bought it, with Selena telling her to get rid of it, and said that she would protect Yolanda from her father, which I don't recall if that was in the book. I just recall that they were talking and that she showed her the gun, and that on the way they were talking about it, which they thought was weird. And I think it's clear to see that that was able to calm Yolanda down to the point where that is probably the reason why she didn't kill Selena in that parking lot. The next day, Yolanda would go back to the gun store, returning the gun to the shop, saying that her father had given her a .22 caliber pistol. And on March 26th, she would also steal more bank statements from Selena in Mexico, along with some perfume samples that they were developing. And while they were still letting her work with Selena, Yolanda would still accompany Selena on trips, with them going on a trip to Tennessee, with Selena trying to finish a recording for a song for her crossover album, with Selena telling Yolanda that some bank statements were missing and asked her to return them as soon as they returned to Texas. And I'm guessing that triggered Yolanda, because then she would go back to the gun store and repurchase the gun on the 27th of March, and then ask Selena to meet her alone at a motel room. And this would have been the second attempt of her killing Selena, but the news of Selena's arrival actually spread really fast, and she would actually soon be greeted by a lot of fans, which Quintanilla Jr. believes that her fans were actually the ones that saved her that day because there were too many witnesses. And according to him, the third attempt to kill Selena was during Yolanda's trip to Monterrey in the last week of March, with Dr. Martinez, one of Selena's business advisors, would say that he would get a phone call from Yolanda crying hysterically, saying that she had been raped on March the 29th. And then the next day, Yolanda would then call Dr. Martinez again, who said that the call sounded as though someone was trying to snatch the telephone away from her. So he sent an employee to Yolanda's motel room to investigate, but the employee found that she had left a few minutes earlier, which I'm just guessing that she was testing out to see if it would work and to see if someone would come for her. So I'm guessing that's what she was trying to do. On March 30th, Yolanda would return from her trip from Monterrey and check into the Days Inn motel, where she would contact Selena and told her that she had been raped. And according to Abraham, this would be the last message that they would receive from Yolanda. Yolanda would ask Selena to visit her at the motel room alone. However, Chris would accompany her. According to him, he waited by his truck as Selena went inside to Yolanda's motel room. And as they were driving back to their house, with both of them not believing her, Selena would also notice that Yolanda didn't give her the correct bank statements that she needed. Yolanda would then contact Selena through her pager. And as they were driving back to their home, not even believing Yolanda's story at all, Selena would also notice that Yolanda didn't give her correct bank statements that she actually needed, with Yolanda then contacting her through her pager, with her saying that she desperately wanted Selena to take her to a hospital that night, telling her that she was bleeding due to her rape. And it's clear to anyone that Yolanda was trying to get Selena to return to the motel alone, with Chris thankfully telling Selena that it was too late and he didn't want her to go out alone, unaware that Selena had agreed to meet Yolanda that very morning. It would be March 30th, 1995, where Selena would get into contact with Leonard Wong, where they would then talk about perfume samples that he had made for Selena. Wong would say that Selena would be meeting up with Yolanda the very next morning in order to get the samples that had been previously stolen. And there was also an account from another employee at the boutique saying that she was planning to fire Yolanda very soon. So the next morning on March 31st at 7:30 a.m., Selena would get out of bed wearing green workout sweats, heading to Yolanda's motel room, where Yolanda would continue to tell her about the rape that happened in Mexico. And Chris would recall this moment by saying, quote, "I was asleep when she got up early to pick up some paperwork that Yolanda had said that she had found. I heard Selena but didn't get up. I didn't know she was leaving. I thought maybe she was going to hang out with my dad, who had stayed over. I didn't even think to ask, and then she was gone." So Selena would take her to the doctor's regional hospital, where medical staff would do a brief physical examination and take notice that Yolanda showed symptoms of depression, and telling a doctor that she had, quote, bled a little. But after hearing that, doctors would see Selena get mad and tell Yolanda that she had said the day before that the bleeding had been copious. The doctors would find no evidence that she had been raped, with nurse Carla Anthony suggesting that Yolanda had to go to San Antonio to get a gynecological examination. Because of Texas rape case laws, that they were unable to do the examination because she was a resident of San Antonio and because it happened outside of the country. On the way back to the motel, Selena would tell Yolanda that it would have been best if they stayed away from each other for a while in order not to upset Quintanilla Jr. Selena tried to get into contact with Dr. Martinez but couldn't get him on the line because he was performing surgery at the time. Oh, and just a small detail, during the time that she was taking Yolanda to the hospital, she was using Chris's car and had Chris's phone, because she had a habit of using her car up to the point it ran out of gas, so she would use his car instead. It would then be 10 a.m. where Quintanilla would contact Chris asking where Selena was, because she was supposed to record a song in the studio that very morning and she hadn't arrived yet. So then Chris would call Selena, reminding her about the recording, with her telling him that she had forgotten about it, but that she was, quote, taking care of one last item of business, that she would head to the studio soon afterwards, and that would be the last call that they would ever share. At the Days Inn motel, Selena and Yolanda would then begin to argue, with other motel guests complaining about the loud noises coming from the room, saying that they heard two women arguing about business matters. Selena would tell Yolanda that she could no longer trust her anymore and demanded that she return the documents, seeing as Yolanda wasn't the person that she thought she was. She would also take off the ring that Yolanda had given her, making it very clear to Yolanda that their relationship was done. And for anyone who doesn't know about the ring, is that I believe the story behind it was that employees at the boutique wanted to give a gift to Selena, so they all pitched in, and Yolanda basically took credit and gave a ring to Selena that was in the shape of an egg. I forgot what the eggs are called. I'm probably going to put them somewhere on the screen, but it was in the shape of that, and she basically used it as a mark of friendship to Selena. So it was very significant when she was trying to say like that they were done. She would then dump Yolanda's satchel that contained the bank statements onto the bed, and she would see Yolanda's gun. It would then be 11:48, where an employee by the name of Norma would be checking her room and would hear the women talking before seeing Selena run out of the room. She was running from a girl that she had been talking to, Norma would say. Yolanda would take aim at Selena, with Selena trying to escape the motel room before being struck once in her right lower shoulder, severing a subclavicle artery, causing severe blood loss. Selena ran out of the room and near the pool, and then the girl followed her and shot her while she was running. Another motel employee would also hear the gunshot, reporting to hear a loud bang, likening it to the sound of a car engine misfiring. Critically wounded, she would run towards the lobby, leaving a 392-foot-long trail of blood, where she would be seen clutching her chest, screaming, "Help me, help me, I've been shot." Yolanda would be behind, still chasing after Selena, raising the revolver, where she would be heard calling her a bitch. And according to the staff, Yolanda appeared to be calm, going back to the room after chasing Selena. According to Carlos Morales, a 19-year-old who was waiting outside the motel room for his ride, would hear the screaming and see Selena running towards him, grabbing him and screaming, "They'll shoot me again." I heard somebody screaming and running and screaming, "Help me." So I looked back and I didn't know who she was. I just thought, oh man, she got shot. She ran up to me and kind of grabbed onto me. So I carried her inside into the lobby, and she crawled in behind the counter. She said, "They shot me. She's in room 158. Lock the door. They're going to come in and shoot me again." I didn't know if whoever shot her was going to come into the lobby and shoot everybody or what. She was just in shock. Morales would help carrying her inside, and she would enter the lobby soaked in blood as reported by the staff. Morales would then help her lay down on the floor while the hotel general manager, Barbara Schultz, called the police at 11:49.
What is your location? Daisy Motel. It's 901 Navigation Boulevard. What's wrong, man? We have a woman ran in the lobby, said she's been shot. She's laying on the floor and there's blood. Okay. Where are you? How old is she? She looks about 20. Okay, who shot her? She's in the lobby right now? Yes, ma'am. She just passed out. Okay. You don't know anything else about who might have done it or anything like that? It's another lady. That's all I know. We're trying to find out. Annette. Yolanda? She's a suspect? Oh, okay, ma'am. Thank you. You know, police officer, someone's been shot over here at Navigation, Days Inn. At Days Inn? Yes. Okay, what's her number? She's out here on the parking lot, 158. Okay, who shot her? The lady in 158 shot the lady over here. Okay, is the lady in 158 still there? I don't know. They shot somebody. She's taking off. She's with a vehicle on foot? She's in a vehicle on foot. They don't know. Well, we need her name? Yes. Yolanda? Yolanda? Uh-huh. She's a suspect? Yes, ma'am. What's her last name? S-A-L-D-I-V-I-A. S-A-L-D. She's with Selena Incorporated, the lady from the singer. Okay, but where did she go? Do you know if she ran out, which way she ran, and what is she wearing? She gets shot at. What part of her body? Part of the body that she... that's Teresa on the phone. Yeah. What part of the body did she get shot at? In her back. In the back. Okay, if y'all come across any information about suspect, you call me right back, okay?
She would scream at the staff, telling them, "Lock the door. She'll shoot me again." With the sales manager, De Leon, trying to talk to Selena, but soon noticed that she was coming in and out of consciousness, saying that she started to moan and was moving less and less. There would also be an off-duty officer in the restaurant of the hotel at the time and would then begin to call for help. After she laid on the floor, she kind of passed out and was just being quiet. Morales would recount. "We kept telling her, you'll be alright. I was with a friend of mine and he was holding her where her heart was. It looked like she was shot in the back and the bullet, came out through the front." And while they waited for the ambulance, De Leon would mention how her eyes had rolled back and then she would begin to go limp. Morales would say that he didn't see the shooter, but that once the police arrived, he went to the room that Selena had told him and found that the door was closed. The room was all the way around on the other side of the building. She had to have run a long way, he said. There was blood on the ground, blood all over the door handles, on the carpet, lots of blood everywhere. Her heart slowly beating away as they would wait for the ambulance. The ambulance would arrive at the scene at 1:55 seconds, with paramedics tearing away at the blood-stained green sweater, applying a baseline gauze to the wound, stopping the surface bleeding, with a paramedic also performing cardiopulmonary resuscitation to try and keep her blood circulating. It was too late, paramedic Richard Fredrickson would say when they arrived in the lobby, describing how when they entered they found her in, quote, "a thick pool of blood from her neck to her knees, all the way around on both sides of her body." Fredrickson would not detect a pulse when he placed his finger on her neck, only feeling muscle twitches. The paramedics would try to insert an intravenous needle in her, but because of the blood loss, there was little to no blood pressure coming, which caused the veins to collapse and made insertion extremely difficult. When they arrived at the hospital at 12 p.m., they would see that her pupils were fixed and dilated, showing no signs of neurological functions, with no vital signs, being declared clinically brain dead. The doctors would be able to establish an erratic heartbeat just long enough to transfer her to the trauma room. They would try to reestablish blood circulation after opening Selena's chest and finding a massive amount of internal bleeding. Her right lung was damaged and her collarbone shattered, with doctors doing everything they could to revive Selena, with one of the doctors describing her as extremely contused and shredded, with all the tissue on the right side of her chest being ripped. They would continue trying to save her, but it would be at 1:05 p.m. where they would pronounce her dead at the age of 23 as a result of blood loss and cardiac arrest. In the autopsy, they would find where the bullet struck and see the artery that got severed. It only realistically took minutes from the point of impact of the bullet that Selena had basically lost all the blood in her body, which is what caused her to bleed to death, and that if the bullet had only been a millimeter higher or lower, the wound would have been less severe and possibly could have given the paramedics enough time to save her life. Going back to Yolanda, after the shooting, she would head to the pickup truck, trying to leave the motel parking lot, with an employee seeing her leave the room with a wrapped towel, with some speculating that she was going to Q Productions to also shoot Quintanilla Jr. and anyone else that was waiting for Selena. Thankfully, she would be spotted by a responding police officer in a patrol car, with him leaving his car, drawing his weapon and ordering Yolanda to exit the car. With her ignoring the order and backing up into two adjacent parked cars and then being blocked off by the patrol vehicle. And then she would proceed to pick up the gun and point it at her head and threaten to commit suicide, which I personally do not believe that she would have done. Chris says the same thing. Like, she's like the definition of a coward. It's easier for her to pull the trigger, but when it comes to pulling it on herself, I don't think she would have done it. She was just trying to look for a way out. So then the SWAT team and the FBI would then be brought in to negotiate with Yolanda, with them running a telephone line to their base of operations adjacent to her car, and then the standoff would continue on, with the lead negotiator, Larry Young, to try to build rapport with Yolanda to try to persuade her into giving herself up, and was even trying to suggest that the shooting was an accident to try and get her out of the car, which, you know, whatever works. With it being noted that she would change her story, saying that the gun went off by itself, and getting on the line to speak with relatives during the standoff. And while this was happening, all the motel guests would actually be told to stay there until they could get escorted out, with them later in the afternoon draining the gasoline from her car and turning on the floodlights directly on her. After the 4th hour of the standoff, they would manage to get Yolanda to confess that she had intended to kill herself back at the motel, which, again, it's a fucking lie. But then when Selena told her not to, that's when Selena opened the door to leave, and Yolanda told her to close it, saying that the gun went off in that moment. In about the 6 hours, she would finally agree to give herself up, and that's when she saw an officer with a gun pointed at her. She would panic, run back to her truck, grabbing the revolver, and again pointing it at her head. After 9 hours of them going back and forth, she would finally relent, and then they would take her away, with hundreds of Selena fans being there at the scene, many of them crying after hearing the news.
It took Corpus Christi police more than 9 hours, but they finally arrested the woman suspected of shooting and killing Grammy Award-winning star Selena. Corpus Christi Police Chief Henry Garrett identified the suspect as 32-year-old Yolanda Saldivar. Saldivar helped police negotiators at bay, crying and wringing her hands while sitting in a red pickup truck and holding a gun to her head until she gave up about 9:30 Friday night. Officials say the shooting of 23-year-old Selena Quintanilla Perez was reported shortly before noon at the Days Inn Motel in northwest Corpus Christi. The suspect is also the former president of the singer's fan club. Quintanilla says the suspect lured his daughter to the motel on the pretext of handing over some papers. Quintanilla said he also suspected Saldivar of embezzling money.
And there would be a press conference with Selena's father and the assistant police chief, where they told the press that the possible motives were probably because of Selena's intent of cutting ties with Yolanda.
Selena was killed by a disgruntled employee, and right now I don't know all the details. A disgruntled employee, an employee that we had some problems with. To remember her the way she was loving. That's all I can say.
During the pre-trial, Yolanda would be called to the court and would plead not guilty to murdering Selena, with her bail set at $100,000, although it would be raised to $500,000 by the district attorney because he considered Yolanda a flight risk, which is very clear to anyone that she would for sure leave the country if she was able to walk around. And when they announced the bail, a lot of people asked why the death penalty wasn't an option, which, you know, it's kind of valid, to be honest. And I kid you not, the county jail that she was at would be hit with a number of death threats and had people fall for them to commit vigilante justice, which I feel more bad for the ones that were working there, because they're the ones that have to deal with that. And they also probably didn't have a good opinion of Yolanda as well. So just the fact that they had to deal with that, you know, I feel bad for them. And that wouldn't be the only worry for Yolanda, as some gang members in Texas were reported to have taken a collection to raise enough money for the bond so that they could kill her the moment that she would be released, which is kind of funny. Just a little funny. It is kind of funny.
Oh, I'm finally free.
And originally there was going to be an unnamed person that would have represented her, but he would quickly withdraw from the case due to the fact that he had feared of the community retaliating against him, and also because of his children's reaction when they found out that he was going to be the one that was going to represent Yolanda. Which, you know, good for the kids, honestly. So the judge, Mike Westerberg, would then try to search for a defense attorney, while Carlos Valdez was the lead prosecutor, with Mark Shurka being the legal counsel. The grand jury would then be called on April 6th to determine whether to indict Yolanda for the murder, with them returning an hour later with a true bill, which for the simple translation is that there's enough evidence to justify the case, which would then be assigned to the 214th District Court with a possibility of a speedy trial. Douglas Tinker would also be assigned to defend Yolanda, even though his wife was fearful of what the community would do, but he did it anyways, and he would also ask the judge for a private investigator. And there would be an attempt to reduce Yolanda's bond to $10,000, with Tinker arguing that she should not be in prison since she wasn't found guilty of the murder yet, that she deserved to be out on bail. Which is bullshit, but Valdez would argue that Yolanda being a flight risk and with contacts in Mexico, and if she was ever released from prison, there was a high probability that we would never see her again. Which is true. Yolanda's family and some past co-workers would argue that she had no financial sources to pay for the bond and that she was incapable of doing that thing that she was accused of. But Valdez would call Rivera to the stand, where they claimed that Yolanda had developed several foreign contracts because of her work with Selena, and that if the still ongoing case of the embezzlement, that basically made it so that Valdez would state that she might have access to some of the money and that the investigation was still undercover, so she might still have some of the money. So that's the whole reason that he was arguing to keep her there. Thankfully though, the judge didn't reduce the bond and Yolanda would then be returned back to jail. After the hearing on May 18th, the judge would then decide to move the case to Houston, mostly due to the fact that Nueces County was predominantly Hispanic and because Houston was more predominantly white, which makes sense. Which might anger some people, at least during that time, but I can understand why he's doing it, because you don't want to give any reason for her to call for a mistrial just because of a bias that the population already has, with them already considering her guilty. The jury would then be selected on the 9th of October, with the jury including several white Americans, 4 Hispanics, and 1 African American, with a request that the trial not be televised or taped as to not have a repeat of the O.J. Simpson trial, which I disagree with, at least in not having the courts tape it for documentation reasons, just because I feel like it'd just be good to have it, but we do have the transcript, so it's not that bad. The trial would then begin on October 11th, and I won't go over all of the testimonies and statements, more for time's sakes, because I know this video is going to be pretty long, so I'm just going to cover as much as I can that are pretty important. So in Valdez's opening statements, Valdez claimed that Saldivar had deliberately killed Selena, calling the act senseless and cowardly because Selena had been shot in the back, calling the incident a simple case of murder. Tinker's opening statement sounded as if he was describing a mystery movie, as quoted by some people, calling Quintanilla Jr. a controlling and dominant father who was ambitious for power and money, and that his removal of Selena from school to sing at nightclubs and bars served the sole purpose of making money. Which I need to interject for just a bit, because if you listen very closely, you know he's trying to portray Selena as a little girl at grown-up clubs. So trying to infantize her, make her, seem like bad things were happening to her. When you need to remember at the beginning of the video where I said that how she, alongside, and I mean like emphasis on the alongside, Los Dinos would perform at street corners, weddings, quinceañeras, and fairs, and how Texas music venues didn't allow her to perform because of their age and because she was a lead singer. So again, it's just, I don't like how this lawyer is portraying this kind of, I know he's doing it because it's his job, but at least for me, who's done all the research and stuff like that, I think those kinds of tactics are quite disgusting. So just hearing it kind of turns me off to whatever he has to say. But I don't know, maybe for you, you kind of resonate with it. But for me personally, I kind of, I got turned off by him just right off the bat with him saying that stuff. And so he would continue by saying that he infringed on his family's privacy by demanding that they live in a compound so that he could watch their every move, which is slightly true, but not to the extent that he's pushing it. Like, the farthest you could go is that the family lived in the same neighborhood, and that, because you have the family close, you can check up on them and stuff like that. I will cover it more at the end, but it just doesn't seem, it seems over exaggerated. But Tinker would assert that Selena wanted to be independent and to quote unquote break free from her father's control by operating her boutique, and that after Yolanda fired the gun, she would apparently quote ran after her friend by helping her and by getting her into the pickup truck, which is so fucking crazy hearing that because of the amount of witnesses that were there, and it's crazy. I don't know. And he also apparently claimed that Quintanilla Jr. called Saldivar a lesbian obsessed with Selena, which in the grand scheme of things, who gives a fuck? Tinker would end his opening statement saying that Quintanilla Jr. drove Saldivar to, quote, near madness by threatening to destroy her friendship with Selena. Which is like, oh my god, I don't know. Okay, I gotta log in, I can't crash out. The prosecution's first witness would then be Quintanilla Jr. with Valdez, who would then ask if he had any sexual relationships or if he raped Saldivar. And he also asked if he ever called Yolanda a lesbian, with him responding with no. And Valdez would then ask him about the alleged theft, with Quintanilla Jr. telling the court that Yolanda was a thief. And I do want to read the transcript just because of how much information you can kind of gather from it. And just so you know, this is be from an article that also describes the setting as he was asked these questions. All right, I'll be starting with the transcript. It'll be a little ways down. You could honestly Google it so you can find it for yourself. But yeah, after March 10th, when was the last time you saw Miss Saldivar? Not until today, October 11th, 1995. Yes, sir. Did you ever threaten Miss Saldivar? No, sir. Did you have any friends threaten her or her family? No, sir. Did you talk to her on the phone? No, sir. Did you at any time harass Miss Saldivar? No, sir. Did you shoot at her car? No, sir. Have you ever told Miss Saldivar that she was a lesbian? No, sir. Have you ever raped Miss Saldivar? No, sir. Have you ever had sex with Miss Saldivar? No, sir. Have you ever stabbed her tires? No, sir. Have you ever harassed her at all? No, sir. Have you ever threatened her family? No, sir. Have you ever had any involvement with Selena's business? I have not ever had any involvement in Selena's business. Have you ever had an involvement in your son's business? No, sir. Does your son control his own business? Yes, sir. Do you believe your son makes more than Selena? Yes, sir. Did you allow Selena to be involved in entertainment so that you could become rich? No, sir. Did you stop your son from his business to pursue his musical career? No, sir. Now let me ask you a little bit about March 31st. What were you doing on the day when you found out about your daughter's death? We were in my son's office, and the phone rang, and me and my son were together, and my sister-in-law called. Me and my son got in the car and rushed over to the emergency room. What'd you see? A lot of people standing in the street. What did you find out? I thought my daughter was in a car accident. How did you feel when you found out your daughter was killed? I was shocked. That's all the questions I have. Tinker, no questions. But once the trial got underway, Valdez's preempted the defense's blame the father strategy by calling Abraham as the first witness. Quintanilla obliged by speaking affectionately about his family and the band he mentioned and promoted. He forcefully denied ever threatening Saldivar, calling her a lesbian or raping her, as she claimed on the hostage audio tapes, which I haven't taken a look at them, but you could probably find them easily. So I don't know, she's crazy. She's fucking crazy with all these fucking lies. Valdez would then call Chris Perez, who testified that he and Selena had stopped trusting Yolanda long before the crime was committed. They would then call up Kyle Voss and Mike McDonald from a place to shoot, the store where Saldivar had purchased the gun, testifying that they had instructed her how to use the gun, and that they also said that she had returned the gun 2 days after she had originally purchased it, claiming that her father had given her a pistol. Then she returned 11 days later to repurchase the gun. Valdez would then call Trinidad Espinosa to the stand, where he testified that he saw Saldivar pointing the gun while running away from Selena, saying that Saldivar then stopped, lowered the gun, and walked back into the motel room, displaying no emotions. After hearing this testimony, Marcela Quintanilla, who is Selena's mom, would experience chest and arm pain and would then be hospitalized to treat the sudden rise in her blood pressure, which is very sad to see the mom having to hear details of the murder. It really is sad. Norma Martinez, the motel maid, would also describe the same events as Espinosa, but would also make the addition that Saldivar had called Selena a bitch, and Tinker would ask Martinez to indicate where she had been on the diagram of the scene of the crime, believing that Martinez could not have seen or heard anything because she was a considerable distance from the vicinity of the shooting. But at least from me looking over the transcripts, it is stated that she was next to Trinidad when the shooting was fired and was able to see Selena run out from the room. The emergency room personnel who attended to Yolanda when Selena drove her to the hospital to be checked for the rape claimed that Saldivar had lied to Selena about the rape and that there were inconsistencies between the story she told them and the one that she told Selena, along with other nurses bringing up red welts that were on her neck and arm, but that they did not show as bruises that a person would get from either an assault or from a baseball bat, which is what she claimed when she was telling him about it. The prosecutor would also show the jury the outfit that she had worn during her alleged assault, claiming that someone had purposely torn holes and shredded the shirt with scissors. It would then be followed by Rosalinda Gonzalez, the assistant manager of the Days Inn, who told the jury that when Selena arrived at the lobby after being shot, she had asked the singer who shot her, with Selena crying out, "The girl in room 158. De Leon would corroborate this claim, saying that Selena would look at him and say, Yolanda Saldivar shot me, the one in room 158. The receptionist Shauna Vela would also say that she heard the same statement, but added that Selena had also screamed, "Lock the door, she'll shoot me again," before collapsing. Vela would tell the jury that there had been so much blood that she felt nauseous before calling 911. The last person to be called to testify was paramedic Richard Fredrickson, who would describe in detail Selena's condition and a ring that she was clutching in her hand, which turned out to be the ring that Yolanda gave to Selena. While we were trying to establish an IV, something fell off her finger. I picked it up and placed it on a shelf in the ambulance. And I'm going to read certain sections of the transcripts, so it's just easier. While we were trying to establish an IV, something fell off her finger. I picked it up and placed it on the shelf in the ambulance. Where did this take place? In the back of the ambulance. What was it that you found? It was covered in blood, and when I pulled her arm over, the hand fell open and the ring fell. I placed it on the shelf in the ambulance. Was it anything unusual? It looked like a man's ring. It was old. At the time, I didn't know what it was. As he was giving his testimony, the Quintanilla family would be seen crying as Fredrickson would detail his attempt to save Selena's life, while Saldivar would be noted as, just staring blankly. In the second week of the trial, they would go over the negotiation tape, with it starting about how Yolanda wanted to die and saying that she couldn't live with herself because Selena was dead, and how Quintanilla Jr. was the cause of the murder, saying that he threatened to kill her, and how Quintanilla Jr. had allegedly sexually abused her by quote-unquote sticking a knife in her vagina, threatening to murder her if she went to the police, which is so mind-blowing, as I mentioned before, the amount of lying that she is willing to do. They would also show the autopsy photos of Selena for the jury to see, with one of the members bursting into tears as Lloyd White described what he found in detail. And according to Arras, when they showed the pictures, he would see Yolanda as, quote, impassive and expressionless and lowering her head. And also a quick mention that there is this supposed rumor of Selena being pregnant when she died, which is not true. The family has denied it, Chris has denied it, and the fact that people blatantly push this rumor is so stupid. And please inform anyone that believes that she was pregnant during this time and tell them that that is not true. And so we'll finish it off by reading both closing statements, starting with the prosecution. Alright, so first I'm going to be reading the prosecution, and then we'll move on to the defense.
I'm going to talk to you about the facts of this case. Our best witness is no longer with us. Yolanda Saldivar killed her, shot her in the back. The defendant left her mark with a bullet. Selena left her mark on the world. Chris Perez said that she went to Mexico to make sure she got the most of the records back. Common sense tell you that this is not an accident. Tinker wants you to think that there is a conspiracy against Yolanda Saldivar, that we were lying. Abraham Quintanilla never had her under his thumb. He was just a caring father that is the product of a productive son and another daughter. They were just a close-knit family. It is obvious that she wasn't under his thumb because she went on to own 2 boutiques. Designer clothes coming out in Mexico. Defense theory is just hogwash. Chris Perez says that he and Selena did not trust her. Things were coming up missing and she did not trust her. Yolanda Saldivar's briefcase was in the truck behind the seat with all kinds of records in it. She had the other information all along. But she lured Selena to the motel to kill her. The defendant, pointing right there, shot her in the back and killed her. There are 7 lies that Yolanda Saldivar has told. 1. About the rape of Abraham Quintanilla. 2. That she cared for terminally ill patients when she was a nurse. 3. That she chaperoned the boutiques. 4. That she didn't need the gun. Her dad had bought her one. 5. The fact that she was raped in Mexico. 6. About how she received her injuries. And 7. When she said that she was not involved in the shooting. It was testified during this trial that the only way the gun can discharge is if you pull the trigger.
And just to interject, when they brought in the employees of the gun store, they went on to describe how the trigger doesn't fire easily. You actually have to, kind of put force into it to even cause it to fire. So it's just one of the many lies that she tried to build.
When Yolanda Saldivar checked in the Days Inn, she had no bags and her clothes were not torn. The only thing the front desk clerk noticed was that she looked a little tired. Later, after the shooting, The clothes were torn with a big hole on the side, the V-neck ripped and a big tear along the inside of the pants. No tears were in the waist. Don't you think the clerk would have noticed if her clothes were torn up like that? Norma Martinez heard Yolanda Saldivar say bitch after she heard a boom. Is that what you call your best friend? You would not carry a gun that you just shot your best friend with a round if it's an accident. She never told the hostage officer that it was an accident. She blamed it on everyone except an accident. The files on the bed. No gun came out on the purse. The purse was locked in the safe. How could the defendant not know that she had shot Selena when there was blood all over the door? At the entranceway of the room where she fired that fatal shot. Forget the accident. It's hogwash. I'm asking you to find the defendant guilty because she is. Use your common sense. Yolanda Saldivar lured Selena over the motel by telling her that she had the records. Yolanda Saldivar said it is like you have killed your own son, not like you've killed your best friend. She had an opportunity to make changes to her statement, but she never did. She even made marks on the document, but never added the word accident or waving the gun. There's no evidence that this was an accident. If it is all the person has to do is shoot someone and just say it was an accident, we could never convict a person. I made up a calendar to show you the events that happened leading up to the day that Yolanda Saldivar pointed the gun and shot and killed Selena.
And it just goes over the events that I've already described. And then we'll just have a little snippet and then we'll move on to the defense.
The defendant hates Abraham Quintanilla, and this is how she hurt him by killing his daughter. I wish Selena could walk through that back door with her smiling, lighting up this room and saying, "Come on, Mom and Dad, let's go home."
All right, now the defense.
You have been paying close attention to the evidence of this case. The one thing we looked for each of you was courage, not just promises that you could return a verdict. Courage is what each of you share. Yolanda Saldivar is not guilty of murder. This was a tragic mistake. Yolanda Saldivar suffered from this loss. The state cannot prove beyond a reasonable doubt that she did not think through their tactics. The state did not think about Ranger Garcia's testimony saying that it was an accident. They brought evidence creating a reasonable doubt because the tape showed Yolanda Saldivar say, "I did not mean to shoot her, I did not mean it." The state brought extremely good, helpful testimony to Yolanda Saldivar and extremely damaging evidence to the prosecution. Look at Joe Clare, stuck by what he said in his report, and that was that Yolanda Saldivar said that she did not mean to shoot her, saying that she did not intend to shoot her. He said something else. He said, "I believe she wanted to go to see the victim at the hospital." Another witness brought some important information. Yolanda Saldivar is not guilty of murder. Prior record, Mike McDonald said the ammunition Yolanda Saldivar used was suggested by him, that he showed her the basic operations of the gun. He said it takes less pressure to turn off a light switch than does to fire a weapon. Mike McDonald said that there is an accidental discharge in the firing range, where bullet holes are seen in the ceiling and walls from misfiring. Then there's Larry Young. He said on numerous occasions before taping, she said, "I did not mean to harm her." He said there should be an investigation of her admission in the police department. Paul Rivera thought Ranger Garza had left the area because he had sent him out before taking Yolanda Saldivar's statement. He was very surprised to find out that he had heard her say it was an accident before she hesitated to sign the statement. Paul Rivera never talked to Larry Young. He knew he had the tapes but never went to get them. Lieutenant Hernandez took photographs from the bruises on Yolanda Saldivar, saying those bruises were a couple of days old, consistent to what Yolanda Saldivar said had happened. Shauna Vela's statement on the stand was completely different from her original statement before she gave to Shauna Vela's statement on the stand was completely different from her original statement before she gave to police in the 911 call. Her testimony is inconsistent with everything and everybody else. Sandra, unintelligible. She said she saw a woman chasing Selena and the woman had bleached blonde hair. She contradicted Norma Martinez and Gloria. Unintelligible. Gloria, unintelligible, had blonde bleached hair. Selena took Yolanda Saldivar to the doctor that morning to see about her bruises, suggested to take her to Austin, stroked her hair, skipping her record sessions to be with her. Now, is that consistent with someone being fired or mad? Each of you assured me that Yolanda Saldivar was not guilty. You looked at me. No one exhibited any warmth towards Yolanda Saldivar except Larry Young. He looked at her and just smiled. Officer Torres said the red truck was traveling slowly, just like Yolanda Saldivar said. There was no police car when she pulled over. What is the prosecutor going to say about the wallet of Yolanda Saldivar and Selena's purse and that she had in her purse when she was running towards the lobby? What are they going to say about the ring that fell out of Selena's hands on the way to the hospital? When you have an inexperienced person handling a gun, it can be an accident. Do note that Abraham Quintanilla is the one making statements about the theft and not Selena. Even though Yolanda sent a letter of resignation to Selena on March 13th, Selena received it on the 15th. But Selena did not want Yolanda Saldivar to quit, and they went to Mexico on March 16th. Evidence was found in the purses that they went to Mexico together. Yolanda Saldivar purchased the gun because she had a confrontation with Abraham Quintanilla, and she was scared. By the way, it was me who got those tapes from the chief. If it were not for those tapes, Yolanda Saldivar would already be on our way to the penitentiary.
After the closing arguments, the jury would then deliberate for 2 hours and 23 minutes. In the meantime, which I personally found a little yucky, was the fact that both the prosecutor, the defense, alongside Yolanda and her family would be signing autographs while they were deliberating, while Quintanilla Jr. would stay in his seat waiting for the verdict, which I don't put it past the defense and Yolanda and the family, but I do need to look at the prosecution and tell them, what the fuck are you doing? Like, I guess they were, it's like one of those cases where like, they're getting famous and stuff, but it's so fucking gross. And I think that they should have at least a little bit of shame. And the fact that both Selena's mom and dad have to sit through the trial and just be reminded of the fact that their daughter's not there anymore and they're fucking signing autographs. I don't know, it's just fucking gross. The jury would return and would find Yolanda guilty for the murder of Selena Quintanilla, receiving life in prison with possibility of parole.
5 hours after the prosecution rested, the defense did the same. Lead defense attorney Doug Tinker called only 5 witnesses, most of them motel employees where the killing occurred. Earlier, Judge Mike Westergren denied defense motions that he issue a directed verdict of acquittal, lessen the charge against Saldivar, and that the state's case was insufficient. The first witness for the defense was Ruben de Leon.
And keep in mind, because of the OJ trial, some of the people in the courtroom, including Quintanilla Jr., were skeptical of there being a positive outcome. So I can only imagine that it must have been a massive relief for them to realize that they got justice for their daughter. And just to make the Yolanda haters very, very happy, you'll be glad to hear that once she heard the verdict, she actually would turn to her defense team and say that she wanted to kill herself. And after hearing the verdict, fans outside of the courtroom and those in Texas, California, and Mexico would cheer and play Selena's music, even stopping traffic on the streets and highways, crying out that, quote, justice had been served. Okay, so now we reach the end where there's not much left to say except that she was for sure destined for greatness, that she was without a doubt a rising star, and that she was taken way too soon from us, but that her music will continue to live on and inspire a lot of people and, inspire little girls to achieve their dreams, and that her family will still keep the legacy alive. That's what I can say for her. So now we jump into the fun part where I cover misconceptions that I might have missed, which really isn't that much. And it's mainly due to the fact that I just love to crash out. But in all seriousness, I will try my best to cover all this, as the main reason why I'm doing this is to basically debunk any conceptions about Selena and her family, along with any rumors that you may have heard. And just to let you know, along with the research that I've also done, I've also seen the series, the movie, a few documentaries, the trial transcripts, and even reading Chris's book, To Selena with Love, which again, highly recommend that book. It is really good at like getting some in-depth look at Selena and how she was and stuff like that within their relationship. So in terms of being well informed, I like to think that I'm pretty up there with being informed. I know there's like 2 other books that I could have read, but one of them I was gonna get it in the audiobook version, but apparently it's complete shit with a lot of repeats and stuff. It's just a problem with the narration. And another one is Abraham's book, which I might take a look at, I might not, but we'll see, because I do want to see his perspective just because I'm covering him. But back on topic, so the majority right now will be covering him, which is why I'm saying that I'm covering him right now, and how he had his dynamic with the family and his background, because I've seen a lot of, let's call him extreme Selena fans saying that he's just as bad as Yolanda, calling him dictator and a bunch of fucking shit about him, which, let's be clear, he is not as bad as they put him out to be. And even in the movie and the show, he's not as bad as people say he is. He really isn't. And like I said previously before, they always bring up like, oh, the family did this, the family did that, the family never liked Chris, the family always treated Chris badly, the family took control of Selena, she never had her choice and stuff. It's just like, a lot of stuff. Like, we need to be clear that when we say the family, they specifically just talk about Abraham. Everyone else supported the relationship. The mom was supportive. AB was extremely supportive from what I've seen. Suzette, I'll talk about Suzette a little bit, but it did seem like she supported it later on once she saw that the dad accepted it once they got married and stuff like that. Abraham, he would eventually accept it, and it seems like they still have a fairly good relationship. And I'm not going off by like what you see online and social media and stuff like that, because that's not real life. It's really not real life. Like, they have a different dynamic than how it is online. And just to go back to AB for a little bit, he did support the relationship, and there was a reason of him not speaking up during that time, and I think it was mainly due to the fact that he was protecting the other band members, as I mentioned before, because they were afraid that they were going to lose their jobs. So AB not speaking up was, I'm guessing that he was doing it mainly just to protect the other band members. And going back to Suzette, they actually had a fairly good relationship. In Chris's book, he said that they had a pretty good relationship before he fell in love with Selena, and I'm guessing the only reason why she snitched in the first place was, one, the fact that she was probably jealous that Chris was getting Selena's attention, just because, you know, they were close, they were very tight-knit. But this is me just mainly being devil's advocate with it, because in terms of who I'm defending the most, I'm more inclined to defend AB and Abraham than I am to defend her, because what she did was still shitty, of like snitching and stuff like that, just because her dad didn't want them together and that she was jealous, possibly jealous of Chris's stealing attention from Selena. But yeah, I'm not super big on defending her, but yeah. I'm not really trying to defend him because let's be honest for a second, was he a good father? No, but I don't think any dad is a good father. They're like not perfect, especially from him. At least from what I've seen, he's ex-military. He for sure has generational trauma. He grew up during a time where there was extreme racism still for Chicanos, and that he still has that old school religious mentality. Like, it's all bundled up together, and it kind of, from an outside perspective, you can see him as a bad father, but was he bad? I don't think so. Because from the majority of what I've seen from people, they always have this portrayal of him being either money hungry, cruel, disrespectful, and that he wanted to have control over Selena and everything that she did, which to a degree it is true, but like I said multiple times in this video, it has been blown way out of proportion. Because I think we can all agree that him taking her out of school was not good. We can all disagree with how he did his things, but maybe in his mind he definitely saw something that we didn't, and I think it paid off in the end for him. Seeing his daughter become what she was becoming, and I mean, me personally, I'm speaking it from a place of privilege to some degree, because I got a good job. We live in a different time where things aren't the same as it was back then, so me like making comments on him is weird, because I need to kind of look at it from the lens of how things were at that time and how he came to the way that he thought of doing things. But I also want to make clear that we should not just focus on Selena suffering, because, again, I need to make this clear that it wasn't just her, it was also her brother and her sister who also had to drop out, because he apparently saw something in all of them, of course mainly Selena, but the fact that he took all of them out of school, I feel like they all went through the trenches together in order to become Los Dinos. All of them combined to create what they were, because there would be no Selena without the Dinos, and there would be no Dinos without Selena. We need to kind of make a clarification on that they all suffered. And I'm just going to do like a small section of me basically glazing them, because I feel like they've earned it. They definitely earned it. Because a lot of Selena fans do seem to forget that AB wrote and produced a lot of her music, which by that time was considered revolutionary by Chris's own words. And then the fact that he was able to make banger after banger, even though, at least from the series, I think they made a good point in showing this, is that Abraham really pushed AB to make music to the point where it just seemed like, I felt bad for AB, because he must have felt so pressured during that time to make bangers and bangers and bangers, even though it happened over a course of years and stuff like that. But the pressure, I feel so bad for him, but also at the same time, I admire AB for being able to, what would be the right word? To stand up for the occasion, I guess. I guess that's what I would say. And of course, I'm not going to glaze Suzette as much as AB, but I do at least want to give her props for at least sticking with it, learning to be a drummer. And even though it was very clear that she did not want to be a drummer, she still stuck with it. And even with the fact of her being a kid, thinking that she was going to get ridiculed and made fun of, she still pushed on through, persevered, and was able to inspire a lot of women to become drummers as well. So in that aspect, I do want to give her props. Okay, but yeah, the glaze time has ended. But even though I don't like some of the decisions Abraham has done, I think I can still give him credit for what he saw in his family, and that if things were at a different place, a different time, things could have been a lot easier for his kids, a lot easier on Selena. And to a degree, I kind of wish that things did play out differently, because we could definitely see a lot more of Selena y los Dinos creating more music, more shows and stuff like that. Like it's just, there's a lot that could have been done that got taken away because of Yolanda.
Well, you're a tough man, Abraham, you say, who shed many tears since Selena's death. And for a long time, you held yourself somewhat responsible. How is that?
It's an emotional roller coaster, you know. You go through a period of anger, then you go through periods like maybe if I would have chose this other path, you know, maybe.
What other path?
Well, that if I wouldn't got them involved in the music business, that maybe this wouldn't have happened.
So you went through all of those what ifs.
Yeah, you feel guilt, you feel angry, you know.
What has been the hardest part for you? Did you want revenge?
You know what? No, I never felt that. Never felt that. In fact, and I can tell you from the bottom of my heart, even today, I don't hate her. I don't hate the girl that killed my daughter. I hate what she done.
Really?
The act itself.
Was it hard to see your daughter and hear her voice again, or do you play her music around the house all the time?
Sometimes I can hear it and see videos of her, and it makes me feel better. But there's times that I can't see her.
And just to kind of solidify my foundation, in the trial he has brought up that they all eventually agreed to creating the band, which I will read for you. Did they start having singing dates? No, not immediately. We would invite friends and neighbors over to the house, and they would perform for them. Had they been exposed to playing at a restaurant in Lake Jackson before you moved to Corpus Christi? Yes, sir. Me, my wife, and the kids talked it over and decided to try Tejano music. What was your position as far as the group was concerned? Managing the group and taking the group to jobs and getting contracts for them. Who was involved in getting contracts for the group? My family, son, and myself. Did you play anything? No. As manager, exactly what did you do? I would take them to Sugar Hill Recreations and they would play. Did you have contracts with the group? No. This was my family. These were my kids. And again, obviously the kids didn't want to do it, but it was mainly due to the reason that they just didn't want to be made fun of, which anyone can understand. Also, at least in the moment in time where they still owned the restaurant and things were okay for them financially, they weren't being pushed to play for other venues, with a disc jockey actually telling Abraham that Selena had the talent, but that he responded with, quote, "I won't take her childhood away from her," which at least in the beginning aspects, I guess he wasn't intended on, you know, pushing them to become a band and stuff like that. And I'm guessing once he lost everything due to the oil crisis, in his mind, he's like, what do I have to lose? Genuinely, that's what I think was in his head. Is like, I don't have anything to lose. She has the talent. I know she can, you know, reach the top. I'm gonna take her there. And there are valid arguments that you can make about him being demanding, but I would say that's more during the beginning of her career, because once she was able to reach her dreams and making crossover music and able to own her boutique and making the fashion lines and stuff like that, it does show in the show and also in Chris's book that her father basically tells her to slow down, funny enough, in order to enjoy everything that they created, and wouldn't even try to control her boutique in any form or way, which kind of disproves the claim that he was money hungry. But yeah, that would basically disprove the claim that he was money hungry, because he didn't even want to control her boutique, didn't get involved in his son's stuff if he was money hungry. And there's also this dynamic that they had just to kind of disprove the controlling part, was that if she got like a deal that she didn't like or anything, she would basically tell them to take it to her dad, which is how they had their own dynamic. And I'll show in the transcript of what his intentions were, and if you want to perceive it any other way, go for it, but this is what I'm presenting to you, and at least to me, I'm taking it as it is. Did your daughter get involved in the boutique business? She was always interested in fashion. When she was little, she wanted to be a fashion designer. Did you control your children? I tried to direct, but not control. You tried to advise? Yes. You wanted her to be happy? Yes. Did you try to dominate your daughter? Of course not. Did you at any time try to get Selena to close her boutique? No, because it was her dream. In Corpus Christi, whose house is it and who lives there? My wife and puppy. Who are your neighbors? To the right, my son. Do you live what could be described as a compound? No, there are 3 on that block. Did you force your children to live there? Of course not. Did you force them to travel there? Of course not. Did Selena live near you at the Corpus Christi house? She was in the process of moving out. They had purchased 10 acres of land and planned to build their own home. Were you trying to stop them? Of course not. And if you watch the series, they actually made it a point that the reason why he even offered the house to Selena was due to the fact that he mainly couldn't accept the fact, at least like in terms of like seeing his daughter growing up, getting married, and now seeing her wanting to move out. And he wanted to slowly kind of soft land into the realization that she was growing up, she was going to eventually move out and stuff like that. He just wanted to accept and come to terms with that. And of course, it's been brought up that he would sometimes go to the house unannounced and stuff like that, which there's been occasions where, obviously they've meaning like Abraham and Selena going at each other's throats, but I'm guessing that's more of their family dynamic rather than her genuinely hating her dad. And I mean, she obviously wanted to be away from them, but still wanted to be close because she still loved them, like, obviously. And I'm also going to bring up Chris's account during the trial when it came to talking about Abraham. Was Selena scared of her father? No. Was he involved in Selena's business? No. Did you have a business? Yes. Was Selena's father involved? No. So, no, this portrayal as him being controlling, evil, blah, 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 I feel like it was just blown way out of proportion, because at least to me, the farthest I would ever go with him is that he was very strict, very demanding. I think that's how he needed to be in order to be the ones to manage the contracts and stuff like that. He needs to be like assertive, very businesslike, take no bullshit, stuff like that, along with the other things that involve like, his life and stuff like that. But I also think that that's just how he had his dynamic with the family, specifically with Selena, because she learned to be independent and stuff like that just because of them going back and forth in that aspect. And just really to emphasize that we do not know how they were in private, because the public and the private life is completely different. And from what I've seen from the movie, the series, and the book, is that that's how they were. And I tend to hold the movie and the show with a pinch of salt, and I tend to use the book to corroborate events that happen in the series and in the movie. And the whole reason why I'm emphasizing this so much is that I've seen a lot of extreme fans project their own personal life experiences, and I'm saying that as them being privileged and then projecting it because they tend to see him as monstrous, when me as a Latino who grew up in a religious household, who has parents that are immigrants, my parents were way harder on me than from what I've seen of her. Like, there's no mention ever of her getting hit with a belt, anything like that. And anybody who lives in a Latino household would know what I'm talking about. Like, in terms of this, it's like, even from like a distance, you can see that he would never hit her. I could see that from the book, movie, show, all that. He would never hurt Selena or the kids, at least from whatever I saw. Because if I was to rate like the amount of abuse and stuff like that he did, it's nothing compared to what some dads do to their children, either by beating them or sexually assaulting them. Like, there's degrees that we need to have, and he just doesn't, he's not up there. He really isn't. Like, just to kind of show examples of what I mean about him being the way with his kids compared to others. Just take for example of Joseph Jackson with the Jackson 5, where he would not only overwork the kids, he would also beat them with a belt and an ironing cord just for missing a step. So let's have some perspective of like him beating his kids for the smallest of things. It's not even necessarily that I want to defend him or what he did to his kids, because I disagree with some of the things he did. It's just how people nowadays made it such a big deal, blew it out of proportion, and basically washed this image of him to be super bad, when we need to do things at a realistic proportion, and he's just not there. Honestly, he really is not there. And just to give like a very extreme example of what I mean, so that way you can get exactly what I'm trying to say, with how people are treating Abraham, is basically the equivalent of someone being mad at someone and then pointing at them and saying that they're premeditating a murder, like they're planning it out. Like, that's how extreme things seem from what I've read, researched, and stuff like that. It's just, yeah, it's a small pet peeve of mine, but it needs to be addressed. But anyways, just to kind of shed light a little more into how they were in the quiet moments when they were touring and stuff like that. They did mention, at least in Chris's book, he has mentioned how her father and mother would treat Selena while they were on the road. Like, for example, when they would travel from show to show with Los Dinos, Selena's mom would actually go into the back with Selena and would massage her hair, or her head more like, and how back when they were kids, he would actually take her fishing a lot, which again doesn't show this image of being money hungry, abusive, yada yada yada. And in my eyes, he knew what she represented as a music icon when they were growing, and mainly wanted to protect her from the dangers of the industry, as we're all aware of how Hollywood is with child actors, stuff like that. Like, he wanted to protect her, and mainly to make sure that people like Yolanda, for example, would not cause her harm. Because at the end of the day, when it comes to it, she doesn't come home as the queen of Tejano music. She came home as his daughter, his baby girl. And it's clear that they loved each other. Like, even though they had the disagreements, their fights and stuff like that, it's something that's not talked about enough. They loved each other, without a doubt. And as I mentioned before, he taught her to be assertive, to go get what she wanted, and to be independent and just not take shit from anyone. Because we need to remember that because he taught her to be assertive, independent, not to let anyone roll her over, she would never have married Chris if it wasn't for the fact that she got all that from her dad. And there's even a moment in Chris's book where Selena gets a new dog with the other ones that they have, and they're about to go on the bus, and he's like, what is your dad gonna think? Because we got a dog, we already got a lot of animals at the house. And he's ready for the worst when it comes to Mr. Quintanilla. But this kind of shows a more human and more complex side to Abraham, which is very needed. But yeah, I'll read that section of the book and then think of it what you will. We bought the puppy and immediately decided to name him Andre. As we headed back on the bus, I suddenly remembered Abraham. Oh no, I said. What's your dad going to say about bringing a puppy on board on the bus? Don't worry, I'll tell him, Selena said. I fully expected Abraham to jump down my throat and say something along the lines of, Son, what's wrong with you? You already have all these dogs, why do you need another one? But, to my amazement, Abraham was an even easier mark than Selena. As soon as she said, Hey, look what we got, he went nuts and started talking baby talk to our little dog. I handed Andre to Abraham, and you never saw a happier man. And another thing is the whole conversation about him wanting to live through her, which is true, again, to an extent. But of course, once he found out that she could sing and had that talent, he wanted her to reach the heights that he couldn't and see it come to fruition for her. And like, once he saw that she had it, I'm pretty sure in his mind, aside from them sharing that same passion, he wanted to see her achieve what he couldn't. And he was going to do everything possible to make that happen. But yeah, no brainer that because of his lived experience, Latino, religious, veteran, stuff like that, at least it's clear from me, for my personal thing, is that he is rough, but far from a bad father. Because at least for me, who is a first generation Latino born in the late 90s, who also has a dad who is also a stereotypical machista, I can relate a lot to her lived experience, and I can see it that from at least putting her career to the side, that he was just very overprotective and he had his own personal issues growing up that caused him to be the way that he was. And I think that the ones who tend to push this narrative are people who are, one, aren't a part of the culture or who have ever lived through similar circumstances, or two, likely born after around, let's say 2003, which is more to say that times have changed and they're just not the same as how things were back then, or three, where they just generally can't back out of their own mindset and just take a few steps back and look at it from a different perspective. Because that's how it is for at least us Latinos or Mexican Americans, Chicanos from that generation, is that we share a lot of that similar experience and can testify that, at least from what I've seen, those types of dads who are so rough with their kids and stuff like that, at least in my experience from what I've seen, is that some of these parents either, one, realize the error of their ways and then make corrections to either their kids when they're adults or their grandkids. And if they don't, then their kids distance themselves because they just don't realize the error of their ways, which I think Abraham was able to realize his mistake very early on, with the example of him telling her to slow down and stuff like that, to live and to enjoy life and stuff like that. Because I like to think that he did simmer down a lot once she reached the height of her career, with the example of him telling her to slow down and seeing her grow her business, especially after her passing, with the fact that he stays seated while they were giving the verdict. Because it's clear to see that he loved his daughter. He just had his way of showing it. Because there's no doubt in my mind that he wasn't an affectionate dad with things like giving hugs or telling I love you, but I can almost guarantee you that he showed it in his own unique way. But one thing that those people can be happy is the fact that I disagreed with how he treated the situation with him suing Chris over the rights to create the book. I don't know why they did it. It is good to see though that they were able to amicably let it happen, let him create the book and stuff like that. But I am glad that they were able to settle, just due to the fact that this gave more insight on Selena with Chris and how she came up and stuff like that. It really humanized her a lot, and again, I recommend reading the book. But now we reach the end of me covering him. So the main thing, if you want to skip all that, is the main takeaway is that he is very complex, and he is a man that for sure has his faults, but I think he deserves some sympathy because as much of a faulty person that he is, he's still human, and there is no doubt in my mind that he loved his daughter and he wanted to push her to be the best that she could be because he knew that she could become something big. And I think he personally doesn't care of what he hears. I think all he cares about is just wishing that he could see Selena again.
¿Tuvo usted la oportunidad de hablar con Selena en los últimos minutos?
No, porque cuando llegó al cuarto de emergencia.
Usted
ya está.
Yeah, that's all I gotta say about Abraham specifically. Now we'll just cover some last minute misconceptions before we go on to a final passage from the book that is kind of like a farewell for Chris to Selena. But yeah, so for anyone that sees some kind of new record or album that comes out with Selena's name on it, that's actually not the family's doing. That is actually the record studio. So if you think that they're just doing it to get like a money grab and stuff like that, it's not. It's the studio that does that. And to kind of give some context, Yolanda would actually regularly receive gifts because of the friendship that she had with Selena, such as a cow rug or anything related to cow, because apparently that's what she liked. And yeah, like this relationship that they had was built over years. So it wasn't like she somehow quickly manipulated Selena. It was like, it was very methodical, very slow. And there's also this rumor of her dating or having another relationship with another one of the band members, which isn't true. The family denies it, Chris denies it. I believe it's people who thought it was either, I think it's Pete, or I think his name is Rick or Vela. Okay, but yeah, now we finally reached the end. I'm just gonna say, depending on when this is uploaded, either the beginning of July or the week after July. But yeah, after this one is uploaded, there's gonna be no projects for about a month to the date of it being released, mainly due to this one being very long. And yeah, I just need time to work on some more projects, but you'll still be getting gameplay videos. It'll be basically like the last few uploads where you'll get stuff, but in terms of projects, this one was way too long, so yeah, I need time to work on more. But yeah, so without further ado, I kind of do want to leave the final words to Chris and to give his final goodbye to Selena. But yeah, without further ado, I hope you guys have a good morning, a good afternoon, and a good night. Until next time, you guys take care.
I didn't think I was going to make it through that, you know. I just wanted to wake her up. I could see her like when she'd be asleep, you know, and she'd be like that. And she looked beautiful even like that. She was always giving people the benefit of the doubt, you know, and look what it got her.
He led me up to the casket once the room was cleared and left me there. Once everyone was gone, I felt, okay, the show was over. It's just you and me now, I whispered to my wife. I stood there crying, looking at her for a minute. Then I gave Selena a kiss on the forehead and stroked her hair. She looked so comfortable and peaceful lying there in the coffin that I just wanted to get in there with her and lie down beside her, put my arm around her, close the top, and say, let's go. After a few minutes though, I got the ring out of my pocket and put it on Selena's wedding ring finger. Then I got down on my knees right there and said a prayer, the tears still streaming down my face, and said my last goodbye.